And for our next speaker, as Vidya said, is Tony McAleer. Tony has a unique history and background. He was a former neo-Nazi, but now is the founder of Cure for Hate. Tony is an international speaker, a change maker, and a father of two. As co-founder of the nonprofit organization Life After Hate, he made it his mission to help people leave hate groups. The issue of speaking about white supremacy, psychology, ideology, and what needs to be done today to help people leave the movement and downgrade its popularity online is something that he's able to speak to with lived experience. So thank you so much, Tony, for joining us. Please. And if you just give us 1 second, Tony will unmute you.
Thank you, Yusuf, for the kind words. I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people, Indigenous people on the West Coast. And on this topic of anti-Asian attacks, I must say, as a former leader of organized racist group, I'm actually shocked at the level of violence going on. And the randomness of the victims and the randomness of the perpetrators, it's really, I'm taken aback by watching. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to talk today a little bit about great replacement theory, what it is, where it comes from. It's something that's been around for a long time, and I want to talk about how that plays into anti-Asian hate, its origins with anti-Asian hate, and talk a little bit about, we've talked about technical solutions, we've talked about legal solutions, and I want to talk about there's one part of it is how do we help people leave these groups behind, or this way of thinking behind, and also how do we prevent people from going there in the first place? So it's a little bit of a different tack, but the great replacement theory is rooted ultimately in the fear of loss of power for white people, and it became very popular with the 2000 census in the United States, where they predicted for the very first time 2050, I think it was going to be the time that whites would no longer be a majority in the United States. And so that sort of started a countdown in the minds of the white supremacist movement to that loss of majority, loss of power, the fear that comes along with that, and the feeling of becoming powerless and being replaced. In Buffalo, it was the motivating ideology behind the man that killed those 10 people in that grocery store. But we have to understand that this ideology, this conspiracy theory, because what the Great Replacement theory in effect says is that there is a Jewish cabal or a cabal of elites that are deliberately manipulating the political system, manipulating immigration, manipulating all these things in order to hasten the decline of the white race and the lowering of birth rates, to remove them from the majority position, and it's being engineered. That is the conspiracy theory of what the replacement theory, the Great Replacement theory is. And there's some nuances to that, because one aspect to the effectiveness of that theory is it's got a very simple answer to some very complex problems, and it's used by people to manipulate vulnerable people. And the challenge is there are people in this society, and as a society, as we go through a time of great change, there are people that are going to feel replaced. There are people that are going to feel like they are being replaced. That doesn't mean that it validates the Great Replacement theory in any way. The Great Replacement theory is a conspiracy theory to validate those people's sense of being being replaced. But it's a natural feeling. And I'll use this sort of ridiculous example. I'm sure that the horse and buggy makers felt they were being replaced by the auto manufacturers. And people in the Rust Belt of the industrial part of the United States felt their labor was being replaced when things were offshore. I don't think it's wrong that people feel it's not out of the ordinary that people feel replaced. And I think we have to remember that when, as we talk about and we condemn great replacement theory, we don't condemn and marginalize people who are feeling replaced, whether rightly or wrongly. And I want to come back just really quickly to something Jenny Kwan said and about the wisdom of Indigenous leaders and that, one heart, one mind, and that they're, the people that are vulnerable to these ideologies are the people that don't feel they belong to that one heart, one mind. Somehow along the way, they've become separated from that one heart, one mind. And really, that's when we look at a public health approach. So how do we get these people back to one heart, one mind? How this relates to anti-Asian racism and anti-Asian violence, and I was listening intently to the woman from the 1907 Project, and I remember back in my white supremacist days studying those anti-Asian riots at the time, and beyond the racism, the reason why those white men went to Chinatown and for 3 days attacked the Chinese community was that fear of being replaced. That replacement theory was at the heart of those riots, as they felt threatened by the influx of Chinese labor, which the corporations were exploiting as they built the railroads and built other things. So this replacement theory has been around for a very, very long time. And so I think we need to look at how do we get people that are starting to feel alienated, that are starting to feel replaced, and bring them back to as Jenny Kwan talked about, one heart, one mind. And I remember reading intently about the events in Buffalo, because this is not an American problem. It's a Canadian problem. It's a global problem. If we talk about Anders Breivik killing 76 people in Norway, if we talk about Christchurch, and yes, it's happened here in Canada with the vehicular homicide in London of the family, or the murder of the 6 people in the mosque, and attacks all over, that are all rooted in this great replacement theory as the conspiracy to explain and direct the angst of people feeling replaced. And often these people they're loners, and people talk about lone wolf. Yes, their actions are lone wolf, but they always belong to a community, and those communities exist online where they find people, and politicians will often exploit that feeling of feeling replaced, of being fearful of change in order to gain political power. And I was struck reading the interviews and it was something that the fellow from Buffalo said. His sister, she said, I knew something was wrong when he stopped saying what's wrong with me, and it shifted to what's wrong with them. And so we need to think about ways from a public health model, and I think in primary prevention and getting young people who are feeling alienated and feeling not a part of one heart, one mind. And whether it's a white kid that's angry and is displaying racism, or it's another child that has got self-esteem issues and is vulnerable to addiction, we need to look at how do we bring people back to the one heart, one mind. And we also have to look at this, like I said, we've looked at it from a technical and a legal framework. We really also need to look at this from a public health framework as well, and as part of a holistic response to bring these lost people back to the fold before they commit violence, before they commit racism, before they continue the legacy that is the Great Replacement Theory. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Again, from your lived experience, it's so important to understand that at the end of the day, these are also an issue of human hearts that have to be protected from radicalization or brought back. A lot of the work everyone here on this call is doing understands that no one's born with hate in their hearts, filling them and motivating them. So what goes wrong, and how can we prevent that from happening to anyone? So multiple communities face the challenge of supremacists within them, people who are trying to find reasons to lash out at the world for their pain. And whether it's one community or the other, it's how to address that at a societal level, as you said, in order to prevent people from getting to where it's really the point of no return, which is violence and murder, and how to stop that from happening together. So thank you, Tony. Again, always appreciated for your very human-centric approach to this issue.